Good morning, Noblesville. It's so great to be with you this morning. It is Monday, April 26, 2021. The sun is shining on this Monday morning. I am so excited to be with you on another edition of Mental Health Monday. I'm even more excited to have my good friend, Kristen Boice, who yet again is volunteering her time to help lead us through an incredible mental health conversation, or just a life conversation, really, here this morning. Kristen Boice, the owner of Pathways to Healing Counseling here in Noblesville. Kristen, good morning.
Good morning, Mayor Jenson. It's good to see you. Yes, the sun is out. That is good for our mental health. So spring is sprung, hopefully.
Well, we say that, and then it'll probably snow on Wednesday or something. But spring is supposed to be sprung, I think. So I think we're on the right path here. At least I laid mulch this weekend, so we need spring to continue on here. So I'm trying to make some positive life decisions around our house, and I really could use Mother Nature's support in that. But I think we're on a good path here this morning. So again, welcome to another edition of Mental Health Monday. We're so excited to have you here this morning. We have some great topics. I'm actually really passionate about these topics this morning, Kristen. We're going to talk about awkward conversations, which is one of my love languages. I love awkward conversations. I have them all the time, and I thrive in them. Maybe, I don't know.
You're the only person I really know that likes these conversations.
I am all about it. So we're going to have some conversations about awkward conversations. We're going to talk about more emotional relationships and building better connection with folks. So, but before we do that, first of all, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you're a frequent flyer, welcome back. If you're my mom, good morning, Mom. But if you have any questions throughout this morning, please feel free to offer them up in the dialogue box. If you just want to say hi, that's fine as well. Let us know you're here with us. But before we get started, one of my favorite exercises, as always, is some square breathing, and I'll let Kristen Boice lead us through that.
So the first thing we're going to do is put our feet on the floor. And why do we do that? Because it helps center us. It helps get us back into the present moment. And the brain, if we're in the amygdala, which is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and a lot of people don't know what fawn is. That's kind of the accommodating, the compliance that go along with 4 ways that we work through any perceived threat. And so this helps us kind of regroup, recenter. You can do this anytime, anywhere to manage your internal feelings that we have in the body that are held in the body. So that's why we're doing this. So first step, feet on the floor, pressing into your feet. Inhale through your nose. Again, inhale for 4, hold for 4, release slowly out your mouth for 8. You can see how long we're going on that exhale. It's like, let it go all the way out. If this is too much, you can alter it. Some people like to count for 7, release for 7. So do whatever works for you. Let's try one more time together. Inhale. And release. Just kind of check in, get centered. A lot of people are carrying so much weight in their shoulders. Every session with clients, I'm like, oh, we got to get those shoulders kind of moving. And on that exhale, dropping those shoulders down to release the burdens you might be carrying. It's not just one breath that gets released through. It's connecting to those core emotions and allowing space to notice what's really going on with you.
Yeah, and again, it seems like such a simple activity, but it's one that can be a game changer. I find myself hopping from one conversation to a next when you're kind of fired up, when you're flipped, right? And if you don't take a second to breathe, how are you supposed to continue on here? So it's crucial. I do it in the car all the time. That's my space. That's my time. I love it. Especially when I'm on my way to an awkward conversation, which is my way of transitioning to the conversation around awkward conversations. I thought I would start with just a quick little story about an awkward conversation I just had last week. So anyone who follows, anyone who hasn't been under a rock might have seen that we launched a new logo about a month ago. Emily Gaylord's about ready to jump up from her seat and knock me out for bringing that up. But obviously, that elicited a lot of opinions in the city of Noblesville. Got an email from a gentleman telling me about the disgrace that I am for the city of Noblesville and how I should be ashamed. And I respect it. We're kind of letting it out, right? He was not happy and wanted to let me know, and then wanted to meet me for coffee. And I was like, boom, I'm going to meet you for coffee. So last week we met for coffee. Several weeks have passed by. And of course, somebody's like, why you're just going to go meet this person who just called you a disgrace for coffee? I was like, heck yeah, I am. I'm going to buy him coffee. And we walk in, and honestly, Kristen, it was such a great conversation. It was two people sitting down, talking about just things in life that have frustrated one another. I don't think we even talked about the topic we went to talk about. But we had a chance to realize that we were both human beings at Beacon Cafe, talking about our kids, about life, about stresses, and kind of just working through that and building a relationship with one another. And we left there genuinely as friends and a nice guy. So I just wanted to start with that story because I think some of you have probably all been in situations like that where you just are like, oh, this conversation is going to be rough with somebody. But you just got to go hit it head on and realize that we're all human beings, that we're all trying to get through the day and survive and raise our kids and do our job properly. And it's taking that time to have those conversations. So that's what we're going to talk about a little this morning, of how do we approach awkward conversations? How do we react when we're faced with those awkward conversations? So with that, I'll kind of tee it up. Kristen, you can kind of lead us, and then I might chime in a few more times too with just some questions on how to manage those awkward conversations or difficult conversations.
Difficult. Yeah, they're very hard. I love that you're sharing that story because that's a real life example of you walking this walk. How did you get the courage? Did it take courage? For a lot of people, it takes a tremendous amount of courage.
Well, yes, and the fact that anytime you're faced with criticism, the last thing you want to do is run towards that criticism, right? But I have tried to change my mentality the last probably 18 months in this job of running to the fire, running towards, because I think my goal has always been, if I can remove a social media component or an email component and turn it into a face-to-face component, that betters that situation tenfold easily. So I was anxious about it, but I was confident that if I had a chance to sit down and meet this person, we could work through those issues and realize that we're a human being. So I took a deep breath on my way there. And I also committed myself to listen. I wanted him to talk first. And I wanted to hear him out. And that was kind of my strategy. And I struggle with that. I love to talk. I'm doing it right now, but I wanted to start by listening.
Okay, that's one of the key components, right?
See? Good.
So you already started us off. One is your deep breath. Bar none. Step one, deep breath. Step two is identifying the fear. What are you really afraid of? I've had people tell me conversation feels like confrontation. Wow, conversation feels like confrontation. So the fear is really important. What are you afraid of? Fear of abandonment, fear of judgment, fear of not being liked, fear of disconnection, fear of being alone, fear of somebody getting mad, fear of upsetting someone, fear of hurting someone's feelings. And so what we do is we go back to how we went into a survival state, a protective state as a kid. This isn't to blame childhood whatsoever. This is to go, how was conflict in conversations handled as a kid? Were you allowed to express your own thoughts, feelings, and opinions? Were you allowed to express all of those core emotions, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, joy, happiness? How was that handled? That creates somewhat of a blueprint. Again, not to blame or judge. They all did the best they could. It creates insight for you to say, why is this scary for me? Why is this hard for me? One of the greatest gifts we can offer is your full presence and attunement. Now, when we're being attacked, we're being blamed, we're being shamed, we're being judged, guess what happens? We want to go into self-protection mode, and our listening kind of goes out the window. Can we listen and have boundaries? For sure. So this is a different conversation if someone's being completely crossing lines. That's a whole nother conversation. This is somebody you care about, you're in a relationship with, that you really want to, and a community member in your case, right? You really want to hear what they have to say. Getting the courage up is half the battle. because we're so afraid of someone else's reaction. We're so afraid of someone's reactivity that it shuts us down and we try to play safe. Like, yeah, I'm not going to go there. And what we've learned from that is we cannot have connection unless we step into vulnerability. We really cannot have connection. We're not connectable. If I'm in a defense place, you're not going to connect with me. If someone else is in a defense place, it's hard to create connection. So if I'm defensive, if I'm self-protective, if I'm in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn because I have a perceived threat, that's just our brain saying, hey, I'm trying to take care of you. I'm trying to protect you. Hey, listen here, I'm doing what's best for you. And sometimes it isn't. We make up a story before it's even happened. And we're already in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And fawn, again, is kind of going along with, I know some people haven't heard that term before. And so therefore, we've already made the story up. We've already written the movie. We've already played the movie out. And it's not even happened. So we haven't even taken that deep breath to lean into that hard conversation. And let me give you some structure on how to do that. Because people are like, okay, great. How am I supposed to have this hard conversation? One is check your expectations. Are you wanting the other person to agree with you? Are you looking for this kumbaya moment? Wouldn't that be great? It doesn't always play out like that. It doesn't mean you're going to change somebody or you're going to change their opinion. This is the misnomer about hard conversations. When you can say, what is my expectation? And expectations, Anne Lamott coined this, are resentments waiting to happen. So if you're going into it thinking, oh, I'm going to get them to see my side, you're already starting off from the wrong foot. So all it is it's active. You're listening, you're present. So you nailed that one. You got to listen, you got to attune. And then step 2 is the acknowledgement sandwich. If I could teach every person on the planet to do this, we would have different ways we talk to each other. What's the acknowledgement sandwich, you say? Okay, acknowledgement sandwich is when you say, I really want to hear from you. I really care about you. I want to connect. We don't use the word but. Ugh, that's like that's like someone sliming you. I love you, but you da-da-da. Starting off a sentence with you always, you never. Cut those out of your vocabulary. We're going to poke holes in all that. So I really care about you and I really want to connect with you. And I'm not using the word but, and I feel sad because when I try to connect with you and you're on your phone, I feel really disconnected. And would you be willing for us to put our phones down while we're at dinner so we can really attune to each other? Because I really care about you. See how I did that? I acknowledged the person, maybe their intention, me caring about them. Then I said, I feel. Did you catch that? I feel with my core emotion in there. I stepped more into vulnerability. I stepped more into a vulnerable emotion. I said sad. And then I asked for another kind of, I acknowledged that I want to connect with the person. And then I asked for, would you be willing? Would you be willing to put your phone down? I just gave you a benign example. And the key here is self-regulation. I can't emphasize that enough. Working on your own triggers. What are your own triggers when it comes to hard conversations? I know what mine are. Mine, if I feel blamed, I want to just go, I want to defend myself. And so I can feel that in my nervous system. And then I will acknowledge, I will mirror back what the person said. And then I'll say, help me understand that a little bit deeper. Or there might be a point where someone's getting escalated and we need to set a boundary. We can say, hey, let's put a pin in this. Let's table this. Let's come back to this. Let's sleep on it. I cannot tell you how much that whole misnomer, don't go to bed mad. Sometimes we need to stop the conversation because 2 people are too flipped. So this is our little brain model. And this is the prefrontal cortex online. And when we go into fight, flight, or freeze and we're highly triggered and activated, we flip our lids. And if I have 2 couples flipping their lids, I'm going to say, take a pause. If you're not able to take your deep breaths, get regulated, put a pin in it. Come back when you have that prefrontal cortex more online. Write the person a letter. Don't give it to them. Write them a letter. Write it out. Get clear on why that was a trigger for you. Here's the last question, and this is that I tell people to ask themselves, and it's going to feel strange. I say, how old do you feel? And they're like, what? I'm like, how old do you feel? So if you're getting triggered by a conversation or you're getting triggered by someone else's behavior or reaction, how old do I feel? Sometimes I can go back to my 8-year-old self when my parents got divorced and know, oh, that's my little girl there feeling afraid. That's on me to work through, acknowledge, and nurture and process that so I can come with my adult self to the table and communicate in a healthy way, which with our I feels and that acknowledgement sandwich. If my little girl's online, I'm going to get defensive. I'm going to function. I'm going to get dysregulated. And I'm not going to be able to hold that space and listen the way that I want to. I don't like how I show up. So, and it's not to shame my little girl at that point. It's to go, oh, this is tapping into something deeper for you. And let's attune to that. Let's nurture that. So those are a few tips when we're deciding on having a hard conversation and creating more emotional connection.
One of the things I want to back up to your comment that I've tried to be working personally on lately is the realization that when I have a hard conversation, for example, I can't expect somebody to come out in full agreement with me. You know, I just had this conversation with somebody the other day who was accusing somebody of not listening to them, for example. And I said, well, just because you don't get your whole way doesn't mean somebody's not listening to you. You know, I think there's a misnomer there that, like you said, that those hard conversations, you have to come out of there with peace. And yes, I converted them to my side. They see my point. They love the logo or whatever they decide to do. No, that's okay to disagree. But part of those conversations are hearing that disagreement and knowing that we can walk on in life on to the next topic, on to the next meeting, whatever it may be, with that disagreement still there and that respect still there, as long as factual information is presented in those conversations. So that's a personal goal of mine right now, is to understand that not everyone's going to agree in those conversations. I want to hear that disagreement, but that doesn't mean we're going to go back and change or completely flip one way or the other. We're going to still march together in that disagreement, if you will.
Absolutely. Here's a question that I like to pose when someone says, I don't feel like you're listening. What would it look like if you feel heard?
Mm-hmm.
What do you need to feel heard? Well, I don't know is usually, well, I don't know. I don't. So when in doubt, then I'll say, then mirror the person back. So you're going to offer. So what I heard you saying is you really don't like the logo and tell me more about it. You know, and you really wish it would go back to the old logo. I'm making this up, and then they're like, yeah, I hate it. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. You hate it. It's a big change. It looks different. That makes sense to me. Is there more you want to share? Yeah. And I think it's stupid and whatever. I mean, the person's going to go on, and the ability to do that and self-regulate through that takes immense amount of work.
Mm-hmm.
It takes immense amount of work to not need that agreement.
Right.
Nervous system says, well, then they'll agree with me and then I'll feel better. I'll have relief because now it feels more peaceful. And chances are a lot of people aren't going to agree with each other because we're humans. We have different tastes. We have different preferences. We have different ways we see the world. We have different life experiences. And the key that you're outlining to be able to sit in that discomfort and that space and that disagreement and still feel like the other person feel heard and seen and understood, that's huge because we aren't going to agree. And then asking the question, is there something else you're looking for, even though we don't see it eye to eye? Is there something else we're looking for? Well, yeah, we want it to go back the way it was. Well, that's because change is hard. Change stirs up emotions in us. Change stirs up grief and loss and discomfort. And then when we have that, we want that to go away. Uh-huh. We've got so used to Amazon priming, going through the drive-through. I mean, to get us some relief, right? We want relief. That's what we're looking for. But really underneath it, we want to be heard, seen, understood, cared for. That's what we're missing on these hard conversations. And a lot of times they don't end up in agreement. A lot of times they don't end up in agreement. And then people go, well, then what? Well, then we have to sit with that. How does that feel for you? That things aren't going to change or that you're not going to see eye to eye. What is that like for you? What does that bring up in you? And a lot of times in families, we played a role. So sometimes we played the peacekeeper, the one that just kind of doesn't rock the boat, just everybody go, we're all good. And we tend to take our roles into relationships. And so anytime there's maybe disagreement, in some family systems that had negative associations with it. In other family systems, that was, oh, we're going to work through something. Typically that wasn't something we learned in childhood, is how to have hard conversations, because we didn't know. We didn't have all the research that we have now. And even though we have the information, it doesn't make it easier.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I love that. Well, great. Thank you for going through that conversation, that hard conversation about hard conversations. And we'll bring these back up because, again, I think we've gotten somewhat trained in life to avoid these hard conversations. I think we're better as a community. We're better as a family. We're better as an organization when we can handle hard conversations and work through that and come alongside each other, support each other in that. So love that. Let's pivot here in our remaining minutes to talk about a deeper emotional connection within our relationships. You have always talked about getting deeper with folks, understanding our relationships better. So let's touch on creating some deeper relationships here to end our show.
So one of the things that people crave the most is emotional connection. Couples will come in and what do they want? They want their partner to connect with them emotionally. And the partner doesn't know how. They're like, I would if I could. I don't even know how to get there. So the things I just talked about are critical. Here's a couple ingredients that we might not have learned. And I think there's a lot in cultural differences and how we were raised. So those are all factors taken into consideration. The biggest piece to creating emotional connection is through vulnerability. What does that even mean? That means getting clear on what do you really feel? And those are those core emotions: sadness, which is based on neuroscience, sadness, fear. Those are the two most vulnerable for many people. Like, try those on first to create more emotional connection using an I feel. See if that fits. Fear. I already said fear. Disgust and anger. Those are typically ones people don't like to talk about. Joy, excitement, and sexual excitement. Those are based on neuroscience. So in order to create emotional connection, we have to first be self-regulated. Bless you.
Thank you.
If we're not coming from self-regulation, it's going to be hard to create emotional connection because we won't feel a felt sense of safety. So that's the first thing. We have to have a felt sense of safety. We have to have a willingness to go to those harder places, work on your defenses, and lean into those uncomfortable feelings of sadness, fear, grief, loss. Try those on and then start from communicating from those places rather than you always, you never, I love you, but you never take out the trash. Accusations, blame, shame, judgment never get us to connection. They never get us to connection. Wanting to be right doesn't lead us to connection. You probably heard this saying, do you want to be right or do you want to be in a relationship? And what is that needing to be right about? Is it about your shame that you don't feel good enough? Is it about your anxiety? What is that needing to be right? That in and of itself can derail that vulnerable connection, can derail that immediately.
Quick question on, so if you're in a relationship, and this is hypothetical, so I'm not throwing my wife under the bus here for a second, and this is just a question. If you're in a relationship with somebody, whether it be a marital relationship or just a friendship where there's just blame, shame, and guilt coming at you at all times, that's probably a miserable spot to be. How do you address that with the person, maybe the blamer, shamer, and guilter?
And that's a tough one, right?
Because it's an awkward conversation.
It's a hard conversation. And leaning into vulnerability, I feel sad because it seems like you feel angry with me, you feel upset with me. Can we talk about that? And it's not okay to like, here's one of the biggest things I have when we got a blamer or a shamer is boundaries. Because we can't sometimes we can't just take it, right? That's not what this is meant to do. everybody, in order to have connection, has to have boundaries. And boundaries are what's okay, what's not okay. So sometimes I feel sad when you talk to me like that. What are you needing? What are you looking for from me? Help me understand what's really going on for you. Because typically there's something underneath the surface, right? And if the person doesn't want to talk about it, you can't make them. That's the other thing. I can't force someone to grow. I can't force somebody to do the work. I have to accept the reality of where they are. I can choose to do the work. I can choose to come at it in a healthy way, saying, I don't think you are intentionally trying to shame me. So there was my acknowledgement. I feel really sad when you talk to me like that. What are you looking for? What are you needing? I really care about you and I want to connect with you. I feel really disconnected when you talk to me that way. So I'm just giving you some examples.
Yeah.
So these are hard conversations to have. These are scary conversations, and it takes a lot of self-work to get to this point, to lean into that discomfort, and then checking your own blame, shame, and judgment of others. We do this all the time. Instead of coming at it in a healthy way, we will immediately get nasty. We will mean, we'll get blamey, we'll get shaming. Check your own kind of, am I coming at it with blame and shame and judgment? Maybe I look like I'm not, but underneath it, I really am. We all have to do that work too. It's so critical to take ownership of your part. Don't over-own things that aren't yours. Take ownership of your part, because that's what you can manage. I can't control how someone else feels, what they think, what they believe. That's up to them. I can only manage how I'm responding to it. We don't want to react. We want to respond.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Well, this has been, and like I said, I was incredibly excited about today's show because there are two topics that I think are imperative for our city, our families, our organizations to move forward, is to be willing to dive into these hard conversations. And they're not easy, and we don't all have to agree. We do all have to respect one another. And we do all have to base our conversations on factual information, which I think is really, really important. I said, I know personally, I will talk to anybody, anywhere about anything at any time, as long as it's a conversation and not a lecture. And so that's been one of my driving principles going forward, and something I have to work on all the time. So Kristen, I really, really incredibly appreciate you and your willingness to help us walk through some of these awkward conversations. So with that, I want to leave us as we always do. If you are in crisis, if someone needs help right now, Kristen, where can they turn?
But if you want to text 741-741 and put connect in the text, available 24/7, 1-800-273-TALK. If you're suicidal, have any suicidal ideation, if you know anybody that's struggling right now, don't hesitate to call that number. They are there to walk you through it. It's okay to ask for help. Please know that. And then we have Prevail here locally, 317-776-3472 if you're in any domestic violence situation. Also, we have Community North, who's here, St. Vincent Stress Center. Please don't do this alone. There is help available, and it's so important you know that you can get help if you need it. There's so many community resources here, so please don't do this alone. You matter, you're important, you're loved, and the shame wants to tell you a different story. The shame wants to tell you what a piece of crap you are, what a loser, or you're not good enough, or you're a bad parent, or you're a bad whatever, fill in the blank. It's lies. So I want to hear to tell you truths, and it's hard to take those in if you've never really been told that.
Yeah, that's all great information. Now, Kristen, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so be on the lookout, folks, for some opportunities to talk more about mental health with us. But most importantly, join us back here in 2 weeks in the month of May for a mental health conversation on Mental Health Monday. Do yourself a favor, do us a favor, invite a friend to join you. Encourage them to tune in May, because it's an important month. It's time to continue to talk about this. So Kristen Boice, thanks again for volunteering your time to walk us through this conversation this morning. I genuinely appreciate it. And again, folks, stay safe. Let us know how we can help, and we'll look forward to seeing you back in 2 weeks.
Thanks so much.